The Galactic Council chamber had heard thousands of warnings over the ages, and almost all of them had been wrong. Stars had not gone dark as predicted. Empires foretold to last forever had collapsed quietly instead. So when the elders rose once more, their withered forms leaning on memory rather than strength, most delegates already tuned out. The elders spoke of humans. They did not describe conquerors or saviors. They spoke instead of a species that avoided expansion, that shunned galactic politics, that rarely answered hails unless absolutely necessary. Humans had no great federations, no crusades, no doctrine to spread. To the younger civilizations, that absence meant irrelevance. The elders disagreed. They reminded the council that humanity emerged late, from a violent world orbiting an unremarkable star. A world that should have killed them. Instead, it hardened them. Humans evolved not in peace, but in constant proximity to extinction, plagues, impacts, climate collapse, self-inflicted wars. Survival was never assumed. It was engineered, rehearsed, planned for. The elders warned that this shaped a dangerous trait. Humans did not prepare to win wars. They prepared to endure the end of everything. Council representatives scoffed. One ambassador noted that humanity's fleets were small, their borders static for centuries. Another pointed out that humans had never intervened in major galactic conflicts. A third laughed openly, suggesting that the elders were romanticizing a primitive species simply because it survived its own adolescence. The elders did not argue. They opened sealed records instead, fragments of extinct civilizations, recovered data from beyond the galactic rim, probability models older than the Council itself. These records referred to contingency species, rare life forms that evolved not to dominate ecosystems, but to outlast collapses. Civilizations that did not rely on stability, because they had never known it. Humanity was listed among them. The last entry. One elder explained that humans never sought to control the galaxy because they understood something others did not. Control created dependency. Dependency created fragility. And fragility invited extinction. So humans stayed quiet, watched, and prepared for scenarios no one else dared model. The chamber grew restless. Delegates whispered that the elders were clinging to outdated fears. The galaxy had known peace for generations. Threats were localized, manageable, understood. There was no need for myths about final safeguards and end-of-existence weapons. When asked directly what made humans dangerous, the elders gave a simple answer. Humans believed extinction was inevitable. Not as prophecy, but as math. And if extinction was inevitable, then the only rational response was to plan for it in advance. That answer did not satisfy the council. A motion was raised to archive the elder testimony under historical curiosities. Respectfully noted. No further action required. Humanity would remain a minor power, peripheral and uninvolved, as it had always been. As the vote progressed, long-range observatories transmitted irregular data from the galactic edge. Signals distorted by distance and interference. Mass fluctuations with no known cause. Automated systems flagged the data for later review. The elders noticed immediately. They asked for the floor one final time. The chamber granted it, more out of tradition than concern. One elder spoke of ancient silence, of civilizations that vanished not in fire, but consumption. Of threats that did not negotiate, did not conquer, did not even recognize resistance as meaningful. Another elder reminded the council that humanity had sealed itself off not out of fear, but focus. Humans had always believed that if something arrived which could not be reasoned with, then speed and diplomacy would be irrelevant. Only preparedness would matter. A counselor interrupted, irritated, and asked a question meant to end the discussion. If humans were truly this important, why had they never warned the galaxy themselves? The elders answered without hesitation. Humans never warned anyone because warnings were ignored. Humanity learned that lesson early. On their own world. The vote passed. The elder records were archived. The alerts from the galactic rim were downgraded in priority. Trade discussions resumed. Political disputes reclaimed the agenda. The galaxy returned to business as usual, reassured by its own confidence. As the elders were escorted from the chamber, one of them paused and looked back, not at the council, but at the stars displayed across the chamber's central projection. Vast. Calm. Deceptively empty. Softly, almost to no one, the elders spoke the truth they had carried for millennia. Humans were never meant to lead the galaxy. They were never meant to inspire it, unite it, or rule it. They were meant to remain unnoticed until the moment existence itself was threatened. And if that moment ever came, the elder whispered, then the galaxy would only speak humanity's name once. Because by the time they were needed, it would already be too late. The first world fell without realizing it was under attack. There was no declaration, no warning signal, no hostile fleet emerging from hyperspace. One moment the system's outer stations were reporting routine traffic, and the next they stopped transmitting entirely. Not destroyed, gone. Their mass readings simply vanished, as if erased from the equations that governed reality. At the galactic rim, long-range sensors began failing in patterns no one could explain. Observatories registered impossible readings, objects accelerating without propulsion, energy signatures that did not correspond to any known spectrum, shadows moving where no bodies should exist. Automated defenses fired at empty space and received data suggesting successful hits, yet nothing slowed. The Council dismissed the first reports as instrument error. Then a second system went silent. This time, civilian evacuation footage escaped before the relays collapsed. Stars dimmed unnaturally as something vast passed between planets and their suns. Defense fleets engaged an enemy they could not visually track, relying entirely on predictive targeting. Within minutes, every ship was gone, not fragmented, not vaporized, but consumed. Their energy output spiked once, then folded inward, feeding something else. Panic spread faster than information. Emergency sessions were convened across the core worlds. Military analysts insisted this was a new kind of raider force or rogue machine intelligence. Diplomatic channels were open to every known power. No one claimed responsibility. No one even pretended to understand what was happening. The third system fell during the Council's first emergency broadcast. This time, they watched it happen. A tidal distortion swept through the system like a slow wave, bending orbital paths and tearing stations apart without direct contact. Planetary shields activated automatically and failed just as quickly. Not overwhelmed, bypassed. The thing devouring the system adapted in real time, responding to each defensive measure as if it had already seen it used before. Fleet commanders attempted coordinated tactics. They staggered weapon frequencies, randomized formations, deployed weapons forbidden by interstellar law. None of it mattered. The entities, as later analysis suggested, learned faster than they could improvise. Civilizations that had dominated the galaxy for tens of thousands of years were erased in hours. Refugees flooded inward, overwhelming border systems and collapsing economies. Trade lanes became death traps as navigation data grew unreliable. Entire species vanished mid-transmission, their final messages cutting off in confusion and disbelief. The Council stopped pretending this was manageable. They activated ancient defense compacts, awakened mothballed armadas, and placed the galaxy under unified command for the first time in recorded history. It made no difference. The swarm did not slow. It did not consolidate territory or establish footholds. It moved with purpose, stripping systems of mass and energy, growing denser, more efficient, more inevitable. Military models updated hourly. Survival probabilities dropped with each iteration. The elders were summoned again. They arrived to a chamber stripped of ceremony. No one mocked them now. No one questioned their relevance. The galaxy was burning, and every modern solution had failed. The elders identified the threat immediately. They named it an extragalactic consumption swarm, a self-directing extinction mechanism. It did not conquer. It harvested. It did not seek victory. It sought continuation. Every civilization it encountered became fuel, data, and evolutionary material for the next engagement. One elder explained the part that shattered what remained of the Council's confidence. This swarm had appeared before. Not in this galaxy, but in others. Every record of it ended the same way, with silence. The Council demanded options. The elders gave only one: contact humanity. A stunned silence followed. Some delegates protested out of instinct, others out of denial. Humanity had no presence in current strategic planning. Their fleets were outdated by galactic standards. Their territories sat far from the advancing swarm. Even if they wanted to help, they could not arrive in time. The elders did not argue details. They simply stated that humans were never integrated into galactic defense because they were never meant to be. They existed outside the system by design, isolated, independent, unentangled. When asked how humans could possibly succeed where the entire galaxy had failed, an elder answered with visible exhaustion. Because humans did not build weapons to fight enemies. They built weapons to solve final problems. A priority signal was authorized, an emergency channel reserved for civilization-level extinction events. It had never been used. The transmission carried no demands, no strategies, no requests for alliance. Only data, everything the galaxy knew about the swarm, compressed and raw. Then the Council waited. Days passed. Systems fell. The swarm accelerated as it consumed denser regions of space. Some Council members began preparing archival beacons, records meant for whoever might discover the galaxy's remains. Finally, a response arrived. It was short. Unencrypted. Unemotional. Acknowledged. Data sufficient. Stand by. No reassurances followed. No questions were asked. As the swarm crossed into the inner spiral, Council analysts noticed something new. For the first time since its arrival, the swarm altered course, not toward a richer cluster of systems, but toward a sparsely populated region of space. Toward human territory. Panic flared, then confusion. Some believed the swarm was targeting humanity next. Others suspected coincidence. The elders understood immediately. Humans had not come to stop the swarm at the galaxy's borders. They were positioning themselves to end it. By the time the Council realized what that meant, human signatures began appearing across deep space, few in number, tightly controlled, and moving with deliberate precision. Humanity had entered the war. And the galaxy was no longer the one deciding how it would end. Human vessels did not arrive like fleets. There was no grand emergence from hyperspace, no wall of ships blotting out stars. Human signatures appeared quietly, scattered across predetermined coordinates, as if space itself had been pre-booked. Each vessel was compact, angular, and deliberately unremarkable. No visible superweapons. No carrier formations. To most observers, it looked insufficient, almost insulting. The Council waited for a transmission filled with demands, questions, or coordination requests. None came. Instead, humans began deploying structures. They unfolded from the ships and anchored themselves into deep space, frames, lattices, and geometric constructs that did not resemble weapons or defenses. Galactic analysts struggled to classify them. They emitted low, constant signals across multiple dimensions, interfering with sensor interpretation rather than overwhelming it. When asked what these structures were, the human reply was brief. Anchors. The swarm reacted almost immediately. It surged toward the nearest human installation, adapting its trajectory with terrifying speed. Council commanders prepared to witness another annihilation, bracing for the moment when the human experiment would fail like all others. It did not. As the swarm closed in, its forward mass destabilized. Not violently, subtly. Its internal cohesion fluctuated. Portions of it slowed, then desynchronized from the rest. The swarm attempted to compensate, reallocating mass and energy as it had countless times before. The anchors adjusted. Human systems were not reacting to the swarm's actions. They were anticipating outcomes. Every possible adaptation the swarm attempted had already been modeled, simulated, and counterweight. The swarm was learning, but humanity was denying it novelty. For the first time since its arrival, the swarm failed to improve. Council scientists began to understand the horror of what they were witnessing. Humanity was not fighting the swarm's bodies or weapons. They were attacking its method of existence, its ability to evolve through consumption. Human vessels moved with precise restraint. No wasted motion. No pursuit. They allowed parts of the swarm to advance, then isolated them using controlled distortions in space-time geometry. Entire segments were cut off from the greater mass, deprived of shared data and adaptive feedback. Once isolated, those segments simply ceased. They did not explode. They did not collapse into debris. They unraveled, their matter decoupling at the most fundamental level. As if reality itself had rejected their continued presence. A council delegate demanded to know what weapon was being used. The human response was unsettlingly calm. This is not a weapon. This is containment failure resolution. The elders finally spoke again, their voices heavy with vindication and grief. They explained that humanity never viewed extinction threats as enemies. Enemies could be negotiated with, reasoned with, or deterred. Extinction events required something else entirely. Finality. Humanity had spent millennia preparing for threats that could not be stopped by force alone. They studied collapse scenarios, universal constants, and failure modes of reality itself. Where other civilizations built larger guns, humans built better endings. As more anchors deployed, the swarm's advance slowed to a crawl. Its attempts to adapt grew erratic, then contradictory. It began consuming its own mass to compensate, cannibalizing segments that no longer functioned as intended. That, too, had been anticipated. Human constructs adjusted again, rewriting local physical rules just enough to turn the swarm's internal consumption into cascading loss. Each adaptation accelerated its own demise. The smarter the swarm tried to become, the faster it fell apart. Council sensors struggled to keep up. The swarm was collapsing across multiple systems simultaneously, not through explosions or battles, but through systematic invalidation. It was being erased from relevance. Then the core was exposed. Deep within the swarm existed a dense convergence of mass and information, the nexus that coordinated its growth and direction. Galactic militaries had theorized its existence but never survived long enough to confirm it. Humanity did not hesitate. A single human vessel repositioned itself at extreme range. It deployed no visible projectile. Instead, it triggered a localized adjustment in causality, so precise that Council instruments initially failed to register it as an attack. The Nexus ceased to have a future. Not destroyed. Not damaged. It simply could not continue existing past that moment. Every possible outcome that allowed its survival had been mathematically excluded. The swarm froze. Across the galaxy, tendrils of extragalactic mass lost cohesion and faded, their connections severed instantaneously. Systems that had been hours from annihilation stabilized. Stars brightened. Space itself seemed to exhale. It was over. Celebration erupted across surviving worlds. Relief, disbelief, and gratitude flooded every channel. The galaxy had been saved from certain extinction by a force it had barely acknowledged. The Council formally requested a statement from humanity. A declaration of victory. A plan for rebuilding. Some sign that the nightmare was truly finished. Humanity responded with a final report. The swarm has been neutralized. Probability of recurrence within this galaxy is now acceptably low. Then came a second message, appended without emphasis. We will remain. Confusion spread immediately. Delegates asked for clarification. Remain where? For how long? Under whose authority? The human reply came after a delay, not long, but deliberate. Until extinction is no longer a viable outcome. The chamber fell silent. The elders understood before anyone else. Humanity had not arrived as allies, conquerors, or saviors. They had arrived as a corrective force, one that did not leave systems vulnerable once the immediate threat was gone. Human fleets began repositioning themselves, not aggressively, but comprehensively. Key regions of space now contained human anchors. Trade lanes were subtly rerouted. Experimental technologies were quietly prohibited. The galaxy had survived. But it had crossed an irreversible threshold. The elders closed their eyes, knowing the truth no one else wanted to speak aloud. Humanity had done exactly what it was meant to do. It had ended the threat that no one else could. And now that humanity had intervened, the galaxy would never again be allowed to drift so close to oblivion. The galaxy tried to celebrate. Surviving worlds filled their skies with light displays, memorials, and broadcasts of gratitude. Entire species declared days of remembrance for those lost and days of thanks for those saved. The Council issued formal commendations to humanity, drafted treaties of alliance, and prepared speeches meant to restore a sense of control. Humanity declined all of it. Their ships did not join the celebrations. Their channels remained closed to anything except operational traffic. Where other fleets withdrew to refit or demobilize, human vessels stayed exactly where they were, embedded across critical systems like immovable facts. At first, the Council assumed this was temporary. They requested a timeline for withdrawal. The message was polite, carefully worded to avoid offense. The reply came hours later, precise and unemotional. There is no withdrawal schedule. Confusion spread. Some delegates interpreted this as a negotiation tactic. Others assumed translation error. Humanity had never claimed territory. They had never governed non-human space. Surely this was simply caution after a near-extinction event. The elders knew better. Human anchors began enforcing subtle changes. Navigation corridors shifted by fractions of a degree, forcing trade lanes to reroute. Experimental weapons research was quietly blocked when local physical constants refused to cooperate. Large-scale militarization projects encountered unexplained material failures, simulations that no longer converged, equations that would not balance. Nothing was announced. Nothing was threatened. It simply became impossible to repeat the mistakes that had nearly ended everything. When questioned, humanity provided explanations stripped of diplomacy. Unrestricted escalation increases extinction probability. That probability is now unacceptable. Some civilizations resisted. A coalition attempted to test human limits by deploying forbidden technologies beyond Council oversight. The devices activated once, and then never again. Their output vanished into null readings, their components intact but inert, as if reality itself had refused to participate. Humanity issued no punishment. No warning followed. The message was implicit and absolute. The Council convened in emergency session, not in panic this time, but in fear of permanence. They asked the question no one wanted to ask aloud. Were they still sovereign? The human response was delayed longer than usual. Yes. The relief was immediate, until the message continued. Sovereignty is preserved where it does not endanger existence. That qualifier changed everything. The elders finally addressed the Council publicly, their voices steady but heavy with regret. They reminded the galaxy that this outcome had always been the cost of survival. Humans had never promised freedom. They had never offered leadership. They had offered continuity. Humanity did not trust civilizations to restrain themselves forever. Not because they were cruel or foolish, but because history proved that desperation always returned. So humanity removed desperation from the equation. Slowly, the galaxy adapted. Conflicts still occurred, but they burned out quickly, constrained by invisible limits. Ambitions redirected inward, toward culture, stability, and endurance rather than conquest. The stars felt quieter, safer, and unmistakably watched. Generations passed. For most citizens, humanity became background reality, like gravity or time dilation, rarely discussed, always present. New species grew up never knowing a galaxy without human oversight. To them, extinction-level threats were theoretical concepts, archived lessons from a darker age. Only the elders remembered the moment before. In their final years, one elder was granted a private audience with the human representative. The elder asked the question that had lingered since the beginning. Why stay after the threat was gone? The human answered without hesitation. Because threats are never truly gone. Only delayed. The elder asked if humanity regretted intervening, knowing what it cost the galaxy. The answer was immediate. No. Humanity had not sought gratitude, obedience, or recognition. They had sought one thing alone: to ensure that existence did not end because someone assumed someone else would handle it. As the Elder's life faded, they finally understood the warning they had tried to give centuries earlier. Humans were never meant to save the galaxy and leave. They were meant to arrive when survival failed, and remain so that it would not fail again. The galaxy had believed the warning too late. But it had survived. And under humanity's quiet, unyielding watch, it would continue to survive, whether it thanked them or not.